Going live. We're live. Okay, I'm gonna start this up. We're gonna wait a couple seconds. It's recording. All right. Intro music. 3, 2, 1. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Black Menaces Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Byrd, and my other host sitting next to me is
Rachel Weaver. You guys already know. So excited to be here with you once again.
We are super excited to be doing the podcast. Looking forward to lots of good times ahead. We're going to kick it off with our Menaces in History segment. I don't know. I haven't figured out what to call it yet. Menaces in History, Menace Moments. We'll figure it out.
It's a Menace Moment.
Menace Moment? Okay, we'll call it Menace
Moments.
Moments.
Hit him in the life.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and then y'all be sure to, once you start hearing this podcast, be sure to email in the Black Menaces Podcast at gmail.com with different Menace Moments and things like that. We'll have the link up, but, anything that you've done to be a menace in your community, we want to hear about it. But to start off today, we're going to focus on Fred Hampton, the OG menace. This man was such a menace that the government said, no, we got to get rid of this dude. Mm-hmm. So he was the leader of the Illinois Black Panther Party. He was a powerful speaker at a young age. He was actually only 21 when he died. But people came from miles around just to hear him speak. And his message wasn't just pro-Black. It was pro anyone who was disadvantaged. And so a lot of what he focused on was poor people. And his message was so powerful that he actually got invited to speak way out in redneck country. So he was out there with the hillbillies talking to them, and encouraging them to unite. And it got to the point where the government, they decided that he was a threat. And so they lumped the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton into their program called COINTELPRO, which was designed to, take out terrorist organizations in the United States. Another notable member of that program was the KKK, right? So the Black Panther Party was lumped in as terrorists with the Ku Klux Klan, which I think is ironic. It's also ironic that the Black Panther Party isn't really around anymore, and the Ku Klux Klan is still going strong. So very effective program there. That's a story for another time. He was murdered by the government in December 1969 at age 21. Police, quote unquote, raided his apartment and fired 99 shots into it. The Black Panthers only shot one time, so I'm not sure why that response was necessary. But sedatives were found in his system after his murder. In his autopsy, they found sedatives in his system. They're not really sure how they got there, but it's speculated that he was drugged by an FBI informant. And then later on, Chicago police opposed naming a street after him. I suppose because of the stigma and the label of the Black Panthers as being terrorists. It's not true. Black Panther Party was not terrorists. They were actually initially started to feed kids breakfast who didn't get breakfast, right? And it turned into a pro-Black movement. And part of the message of the Black Panther Party was to defend themselves. Because the police were coming into neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, and basically just terrorizing the area. We were being terrorized by white supremacist groups, by hate groups. And so the Black Panther Party was formed as a way of protecting our communities from that. There's actually, it's also why the Bloods and Crips were started as a ways to protect the Black community. And it's unfortunately morphed into something different, but it started off just like the Black Panthers. But that's our Menace Moment for today, Fred Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to learn more about him, a movie came out about him a couple years ago, Judas and the Black Messiah. And then you can also look up other information. I got the information today from mentalfloss.com.
He's awesome. As a Chicago native, I am very upset that they opposed naming a street after him, because we've got streets named after every single president, even the ones who weren't the best. So that's upsetting.
Is there Andrew Jackson Street?
Yes. We don't call it
Thomas
Andrew, it's just Jackson.
Just Jackson Street?
Jackson is the street that I got off that's the train stop I got off on coming from school to go home. And I would get on the bus at Jackson. So, wow.
Was it him or was it Thomas Jefferson that raped a bunch of slaves? And
I know it was Jefferson. It might have been Jackson too, but I know it was Jefferson.
Yeah.
He's the one who
George Washington
had what was her name? He had a Black mistress.
Yeah, her name was Sally.
Yes, Sally Hemings.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. No, that's her. No,
Mhm.
that's the story. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
And then there's a speculation that George Washington's teeth were from slaves. Have you heard that before?
No.
Yeah, like his false teeth. I don't know if it's true,
It's
but
giving Get Out.
yeah, I've heard that like his teeth came from the slaves that he owned.
Honestly, not
But,
surprised.
dude was from Virginia.
Yeah.
Like, do we really think that he was?
Yeah, and there's so much horrific stuff that happened during slavery that we don't know and we still don't know because they have obviously they didn't want that to come out. So, well, today, guys, we're going to answer some questions about being at a predominantly white institution, which most Black students or BIPOC students call it PWI for short. So we'll be referencing that a lot in this episode, just so you kind of know. So we have gotten questions from other people, whether just talking to them or in our comments, about any tips that we have for attending a PWI as a Black student. Nate, do you want to take us away on that?
Yeah, I feel like I've answered this question so many times lately. But the biggest tip I can give: don't assimilate. Right? There's a lot of pressure to try and fit in a place, but just hold out for your community, whatever that may be. If there's something that you're passionate about, wait for that community to come along. Don't try to change yourself to fit into what other people's ideas of you should be. Right? I made that mistake my freshman year. Um, I made some pretty good friends, but I did a lot of self-compromising where I tried to be a certain way, to be more approachable, to be more likable, and it took a toll on my mental health. I didn't realize that until later on, but yeah, it definitely took a toll on my mental health. Just trying to be someone who I was not. And so once I accepted that, hey, I'm just gonna be who I am. I'm this like weird combination of introverted and extroverted. I think they call it an omnivert. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm introverted around people I don't trust or like, and then I'm extroverted around people I love. So, we're not gonna get into race or nothing like that, but I tend to be more extroverted when I'm around fellow blacks. Um, but yeah, so just don't try to assimilate. Find your community. Reach out to the Black Student Union. See if they're doing meetings, or if it's Hispanos Unidos or whatever it is. Find your community, and when you feel comfortable, then that's where you need to be. If you feel uncomfortable, don't try to force it. All right.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Nate said. I also think that when you attend a PWI, you have to do a lot of self-care and a lot of taking time for yourself and being aware of your mental health. Because personally, I had never gone to a PWI before BYU. So I feel like students who maybe attended a PWI growing up, you might have different coping mechanisms that you're used to. But for me, especially my first year of college, I had to take a lot of time to validate myself and validate the experiences that I was having. And that's like mental health because you feel crazy sometimes. You're like, am I imagining this? Is this really reality? Are my feelings real? Am I making them up almost? Like you question your experience. And so I think for me, that's my biggest tip also is taking time for your mental health and going to see professionals. If your school offers mental health services for free, I would try to do that because um, I needed to do that my freshman year and talk through a lot of the feelings that I was feeling being the only Black person in so many spaces, which it sounds small, but if you really haven't experienced it a lot, it takes a big toll on your mental health. And right now, I'm in a better space, obviously because I have better coping mechanisms, I have a better community, and I'm just more comfortable in the spaces. But if that's a first transition for you, I really think you do need to take that time. And that's why Nate said having that community and seeking out a community that can support you is really critical because that will make the difference between you feeling validated by people around you versus other people feeling the fire of you feeling maybe like you already don't fit in and people not validating the feelings that you do have.
I agree with that for sure. Also, I just had this thought. I want to bring this up. White people, we love you. Okay. When we talk about white people, Black people, whatever, it's gonna come up a lot. Just know we're not talking about all white people. We know that there are plenty of y'all who are good folks, but we also know that there's a whole lot of things that go on that none of us should be proud of. But yeah, just know when we talk about white people or when we talk about race on this show, we're not calling out anybody specific unless we call them out by name, right? So just know we don't have any hate for nobody or anything like that. We just talking, okay? Just want to throw that out there.
And to add on that, I want to say that white people also need to transfer. This is me being very blunt. White people need to stop taking things personally. If we say white people, sometimes we are talking about you as a whole. It doesn't mean you as an individual are a bad person, but as a black person who identifies with a marginalized community, sometimes just the group overall, even if they're harmless, even if they aren't trying to be mean and whatever, just being in those types of spaces sometimes just don't make us feel safe. And there's not really necessarily something someone did or didn't do that makes us feel that way. It's just our existence and the way that we've been socialized with race and culture and expressing ourselves. Like sometimes a white person, they don't have to say anything to me, but when I walk into a room full of white people, I'm automatically less comfortable and less confident being me and expressing myself culturally as an African American. No one has to say anything to me. No one does anything to me. It's just the way that I've been socialized up to this point. And so I also think that white people need to take that into account, that it's not personal. Sometimes it's literally just like the social construction of race in America and the way that we interact with one another that impacts the way I'm going to interact with you before you even speak to me.
That's very true. I'm a lot less open and trusting when I walk into a space that's full of white people. It's just a sad reality, right? There's this. I'm so glad I don't have to do it anymore. But I had this job where I had to go to this networking meeting, and it would be like a bunch of small business owners, and everybody in there was white except for like a couple of people who were married to white people, right? So, I would have to go into this space, and they wanted me to network, and I was just like, man, I do not enjoy this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to talk to these people. I don't want to network. And I did it, but it was very just on the inside. It was always this feeling of not wanting to be there. And then I went to this event, this D9 event, and there was a bunch of black business owners there, a bunch of black professionals, and I was like, man, I want to talk to everybody. I want to get to know this person. I want to know more about this person. And it was just kind of a subconscious thing, but I was like, I feel so much more comfortable in this space with these people than I do in this space with these people, right? So yeah, like Rachel said, we're not hating on anyone, but sometimes we're just talking generally. And whiteness and white people are kind of synonymous at times, right? Whiteness is very different, though. Whiteness is just like the culture overall. When we talk about whiteness, we're talking about, ego. We're talking about privilege. We're talking about, the lack of awareness, right? You see a lot of whiteness on display in our videos, right? If you check those out, the fact that people don't know who Trayvon Martin is, the fact that people don't know what Colin Kaepernick stands for, the fact that people are not aware of Ketanji Brown Jackson being nominated to the Supreme Court, the ability to not know that is, that's a privilege, right? Because for some of us, like, we can't go without ever knowing that. Like, I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in a black family, and we didn't talk too much about, current events and issues and things like that going on in the world, but I still knew who Trayvon Martin was. Like, I knew when he died. I knew I was following the case. Like, I was aware of all of those things because I didn't have the privilege to not know about that, right? So, yeah, that's that. Anyway, another question?
Or do you have something? Well, I mean, kind of in the same vein, how do you navigate a predominantly white space?
Yeah, that's a question. Look at us. We just segued right on.
I know, perfect.
Yeah. So navigating a predominantly white space. Sometimes there's just no easy way to do it. If you got to be there, you got to be there. With college, you kind of got to be there. The way that the game is set up. I disagree with college, but that's a story for another time. Being a graduate myself, I'm a hypocrite. But when you got to be in those spaces, I would just say, don't stay in those spaces longer than you have to, right? If you got to be in a predominantly white space, make sure you find yourself a quiet place. For me, whenever I had to be on campus, we had the black table that we hung out at, and then I also found my own little quiet place on campus. It was up on the 5th floor of the student center. There's this little hallway that hardly anybody was ever in, and I would just go up there and I would do my homework up there. I'd be up there for hours. It's not, just completely quiet. Only people that came up there was like the maintenance people, and so I would just hang out in that hallway. So if you can find you a quiet space on a campus or in a predominantly white institution, or if you can find a community to hang out with while you're on campus, then do that. Get in there, do your business, and get out. If it's a professional space or a workspace, then just, there'll always be a couple people that's cool in, whatever space you're in. And so just do your best to find those people. If you can't find them, then just, don't try to assimilate, don't try to fit in, just be yourself, and people will come to you. If they don't, then I don't know what to tell you. Just muddle through it, I guess. That's my pessimistic viewpoint. Maybe Rachel got something better to add.
I mean, I agree with everything Nate said. I also think that for me personally, sometimes when I'm in predominantly white spaces, I find myself mentally questioning myself more, mentally reflecting on my actions, reflecting on my words more than I do when I'm in a community of people I feel safe with. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I think that that's really mentally taxing. It's mental gymnastics that is just not fair. And so I think for me, I'm a firm believer in don't associate with people who make you feel that way and you feel like you do that with. I feel like I did that a lot my first year of college at BYU because I wanted to have the BYU experience, the student experience. And really, again, I speak about BYU because this is my main experience being in predominantly white space or also my mission. And I think that you just have to literally, I just don't associate. That sounds probably not plausible for some people, but I literally only associate in spaces that I don't feel like I have to do that in. And for me, that is being with other minority students. Also being a part of the social sciences has been that space for me. But in other spaces, like if I go to a random ward, that's how I feel when I'm with just random white people who go to BYU that I don't know anything about. And so I think really, like Nate said, finding spaces that you feel like you can be yourself in, that helps relieve that pressure because at least in my experience in predominantly white spaces, it has less to do with the like white people and more has to do with the mentality of the people that are there and what I know that they're thinking about me and what they believe about me and their assumptions about me. If I know that they think that black people are ignorant, if I use a slang word, I question why did I say that in front of them? Now they're gonna think, I'm representing all black people to them. They're gonna think all black people are like this. And then I'm like, oh, I'm a very extroverted, loud person. But as a black woman, we have the stereotypes of being loud, aggressive, all these things. But that's just kind of my personality. That has nothing to do with me being black. And so if I act that way in front of a group of white people, I'm like, oh, I question and I think about it. But when I'm around my friends who I know me as an individual, I don't think like that. I don't worry about that. And so, yeah, I think just protecting yourself. And I worry as I enter the workforce coming soon as I get a job and what that will look like. So I don't really have experience in terms of that. But I think on our college campus, really just, I always tell people I do not associate with the main BYU population because when I do, I feel terrible about myself. Yeah, so I think just moving away from those people if you can. It's easier than you think. It's hard at first, but once you find that group, you actually find more and more people part of that community that you feel like you can be yourself in.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Especially at bigger schools that are more liberal than ours. There's probably more people on your side
true, yeah.
at BYU. So
and don't say they don't exist, because if we can find it at BYU in Provo, Utah,
come on,
then you can find it where you're at. Trust me, they're out there, right? And sometimes it's better just to be chilling by yourself than it is to be in a group of people that you know you don't belong in, right? Mm-hmm. So just hold out for that group. But,
and you have to seek that out, though. Yeah. That's a big thing, because a lot of people who come to BYU, they don't seek it out until like their last year of college, and then they're like, oh, why is my experience so poor? It's like you were trying, and no one's faulting anyone who did this, but you spent the last 3 years trying to assimilate so much, and you wonder why you have mental anguish, and now you found this group. Like, seek it out immediately as soon as you can. Yeah, and by those groups, that's other minority groups, even political organizations like if you have a Democrat or liberal group, even if you don't necessarily identify politically with that, people who are more liberal are more open-minded. Normally, not always, there's still going to be some crazy people everywhere you go, but normally people who lean more left are going to be more open and understanding to different experiences and perspectives.
I will say, so just to kind of, I will say that, yeah, there's a lot of people who are like more open-minded, but I also think that like the media, the way media portrays everybody, like you got radicals on both sides. Right?
Agreed.
You got like left radicals, right radicals. I've talked to plenty of people who are very like conservative, who are still decently open-minded
This is
about a
true.
lot of things, right?
This is true.
There's that, but
I
yeah,
agree.
it does tend to feel like I prefer to be around people who are liberal.
I wouldn't go to the conservative club though. I
Oh,
would not
no,
go to
absolutely
BYU
not.
Republicans
No,
looking for
because
friends.
if you're in that club,
you see what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like, don't go to BYU conservatives if you want to.
Right, because that's the people that are like, the blacks,
Right.
affirmative action.
Exactly. They're the ones who want to argue with you about why we need to not have food stamps or something.
Right. Just great. Anyway, next question.
Okay, next question that I found in our comments is someone's just saying they don't go to BYU, and so they're really just curious on ways that BYU actually is racist and discriminatory.
So they want to know
like what things at BYU,
Oh.
are racist and discriminatory.
Well, I mean, you can go check out my little personal TikTok page. I made a video about this.
Yes, that is a great TikTok.
And it's got like thousands and thousands of comments. That one found its way into the wrong stream of comments.
Oh, really?
They hate me on that video.
Oh, really? I haven't read the comments.
Go read the comments. Them people hate me on there. I got trolls left and right, but it's all right. It got like 600,000 views, so I'm not mad at it.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
But things that are racist at BYU. Where do we start? Well, I think there's not necessarily any policies that are blatantly like anti-black, right? But there are a lot of policies based on a certain way of thinking, based on a certain culture, that do discriminate against certain populations. So, for example, back in I think the 60s or 70s, BYU instituted this ridiculous rule where you couldn't have a beard on campus. You could only have a mustache, which I think is
Yeah, it was during the Vietnam War or something like that.
I think the idea was they didn't want people to look like hippies because hippies were dirty, nasty, I don't know, whatever idea they had. It was like the very, all the old people at the top of the church food chain thought that the hippie movement was anti-Christian. You go back and read. They thought it was communism and all this stuff.
Right.
And so they made it against the BYU law to have a beard. And so now you got a lot of people walking around with creepy mustaches, although thankfully that's faded away because it used to be it looked like child molesters.
Yeah, more people have beards on campus than you think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When they have to go take a test, they shave it.
Yeah. You can get, they don't care as much anymore. But yeah, you can go get like a beard card. Basically, you have to go pay a doctor money. And then you go to the doctor, they look at your face, then you go home, you shave for a week. You shave every day for a week. And then once you get all the bumps and the rash and everything on your face, then you go back to the doctor and they sign off a note saying, okay, you don't have to shave. And then you take that to BYU and they give you a special mark that says you can have a beard on campus. And so, that's not specifically discriminatory against Black people because when it was made, there weren't hardly any Black people on campus. However, it's a well-known fact that Black people, especially Black men, have a more difficult time with shaving and growing facial hair and things like that because our hair tends to be very curly. And so what it does is it curls and it goes back inside the skin, causes ingrown hairs, painful razor bumps and things like that. And so, we don't shave as often, most of us, and, it's harder for us to shave as frequently. So having to go pay money to get a beard card is, it discriminates more against Black men because we have that problem much more frequently than with a white person who shaves every day. I don't know. I'll think of some other ones, but what you got any?
I mean, going off honor code, there's the rule also about how long a man's hair can be. It can't go past his ear or whatever. But not just Black people. There's
extreme hairstyles is the.
Oh yeah, that's also in the honor code language. But the hard thing is that left up to interpretation of whoever's in the honor code office or whoever decides to report you. And the thing is, Black people's hair is just so different that when we try to put the same rules that we use to judge white people's hair against Black people's hair, it's just not going to work out because our hair is so different.
Your brother got reported, didn't he?
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother story. We should have him on and tell that one time. But it's just like example, Nate, you have your growing dreads right now. Black people do things like this to take care of our hair. Like dreads are not allowed technically on black men, but if a black man does not brush his hair is gonna dread up naturally. You know what I mean? So there's certain things that I'm like, I think that is discriminatory unconsciously. There's Native American people who they grow their hair out really long because it's cultural. I don't fully understand what the hair means, but I know that it is important to their culture. But you men cannot have long hair, so they would have to cut it. And to me, I'm like, that doesn't make sense because that's someone's culture. That's a part of who they are as an individual. And the fact that BYU's policies do not have that considered in it is a problem to me. And that's what we mean when we look at institutions that are built for white people, that were made by white people with white people's air quote culture or ideas considered, without looking at other marginalized groups that now are part of these communities, and the policies still haven't been updated. And BYU very much knows and has heard complaints from many ethnic groups about their honor code policies that negatively impact students of color. Should I tell the story about my brother and his hair really quick?
Yeah, I say go for
okay.
it. Okay. And then I'm gonna tell you.
Okay, yeah. So my first year of college, my brother dyed his hair blonde. And I think a lot of black men, I know a lot of black men who've gone through their dye hair blonde phase. Nate, you didn't have one of those, did you though?
I did not.
Okay, that's good.
I was too saved.
Yeah.
When I got here.
Most black men that I know go through it. It's not the best time in their life, but it's okay. But yeah, they all go through a kind of phase where they dye their hair to some degree. My brother's hair looked like ramen noodles. Love him, but again, wasn't the best look. That's beside the point. So he has his hair blonde, right? And he's at BYU, and he went to go get a new ID photo because he had lost it. And so when he had gotten this new ID photo, to do anything on campus, like get photos, to get services, you have to look an honor code. Because if you're violating any honor code physical grooming standards, they will not serve you. And so they gave him his ID, but the girl who took the photo, I guess, decided that his hair was not in the BYU grooming standards and reported him to the honor code office. So my brother, at this time, when they report you to honor code, you didn't know why you went up there. So he went up there and like, what did I do? Like, what's going on? And they're like, well, someone has said that your hairstyle is like against the standards. When the person he spoke with said, oh, your hair color is an unnatural hair color, because in the honor code, the wording is no unnatural hair colors, which means like blue, green, pink, things like that. That's how I interpret it. But they said, oh, that's an unnatural hair color for you as a black person, because black people don't have blonde hair. And Ronald,
which is false.
Which is not true. But also, we're now telling people that they can't dye their hair blonde. So that means everybody with blonde highlights has to go, all those balayages, all the old ladies who dye their hair to not make it be gray.
Thank you. You know how many natural brunettes at BYU are blonde?
Thank you. And so my brother was sitting there like, are you seriously telling me? Because so the reason why it's not a natural hair color is because I'm black. And that's literally what she said. She's like, yeah, it's not a natural hair color to you. And yeah, my brother went off and got very upset, and then he had to call somebody else in who was a little more understanding and had more, I guess, experience with air quote diverse communities. And eventually the issue didn't become something on his record. But the fact that my brother even had to deal with that is just an example of how BYU can inherently be discriminatory towards people of color.
I had another friend who was a black woman. She had some braids in, and her braids had like some red in them, and they turned her away from the testing center. She wasn't allowed to take her test because her hair was an unnatural or extreme hairstyle. I think they got that resolved too. But just the fact that somebody looked at her and was like, oh, you have red in your braids, therefore you cannot take this test. The fact that anybody, like another student would have that kind of power to just like, no, you can't take your test, that's wild to me. And there's plenty of people on campus who have what might be considered an extreme grooming style or what have you that don't have to deal with that. I had another story. I forgot what it was though.
Well, something I wanted to bring up is in the race report that the race committee made when they wrote their suggestions to BYU. Something I just want to highlight is just the lack of BIPOC applicants at BYU. And this isn't necessarily inherently discriminatory towards BIPOC students, but I think we need to look at the fact that Black, Indigenous, other people of color are not applying to BYU. Even though majority of membership in the church now globally is more BIPOC people because of other nations, but the fact that these numbers are so low at BYU, it's showing. I mean, obviously there's a lot tied in here that's bigger than just BYU, but I also think that BYU itself as a church-run school needs to look at this. So in 2020, there were 9,987 applicants that were white, and then there were only 2,020 applicants that were BIPOC. And that's everything. That's Black people, Hispanic people, Polynesian people, everyone. That's so small. Like, that is really, really small. And then they broke it down by race. And so Black students specifically, there were only 54 Black applicants in the 2020 application school year.
That's wild.
And then out of those 54, only 21 of those students were accepted. So think about that. And then that year there were how many? Okay, I'm trying to see the number. Sorry. Yeah, that's super small.
So is it out of 11,000 applicants, only 50 of them were Black?
Mm-hmm.
And then 20 of them got in. 25.
Well, there's also multiracial, which could consider.
That's true. The
multiracial category has 1,332 students that identify, and there's definitely Black students who probably identify. I'm assuming that are they present Black.
Yeah.
But they are.
And that's a tricky category to be in too.
But that category also can include there's a lot of half Hispanic students. Because of interracial marriage in the church, and half Asian students. But there's also, I know there are definitely Black students in that category.
That's very true, yeah.
But still, that's so small, 54.
Yeah, and BYU is 81% white. And do you have the graduation rate thing on there?
Yes, the graduation rate.
Graduation rate.
Okay, this is a 6-year graduation rate. BYU has 6 years because of missions, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, it keeps jumping. Okay, the rate for white students is 79%.
So out of all the white students that come to BYU, 79% of them graduate
within 6 years. For 2 or more races, 78%, which I guess is multiracial. Asian students, 77%. Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, 68%. Hispanic or Latino, 66%. Black, 54%. And then American Indian or Alaska Native is 41%. Within 6 years.
Abysmal, absolutely abysmal. So you got to ask yourself, why is it so much more difficult for students of color to graduate than it is for white students? Because white students they're leading the pack, right? And then down at the bottom you've got Black students and Native American students graduating at a much lesser rate. And I personally know a lot of Black students that came to BYU and then decided to leave because they couldn't take the situation, the environment here, right? And it's definitely not for everybody. Yeah, and I would say another thing that's not necessarily a policy, but just really like a mindset. First of all, it is an extremely conservative religious university. That makes it difficult.
The most conservative university, right? I've seen reports where it was voted #1. It might not be anymore, but it has been.
But so there's that, and so that automatically makes it a little bit more difficult if you're a person of color, because so many of the issues that conservatives oppose or support directly affect people of color at a much higher scale than would other ones. And so a lot of those things can play a role into the way that people think here. And then also a lot of the professors and the just church members believe a certain way about people of color. They believe that people with dark skin are cursed. And the church doesn't officially teach that on the record books anymore. However, they do. There are still lots of people who teach that. There have been professors. I've personally sat in classes where professors have talked about the curse of Blackness and things like that. And they'll say, oh, we don't believe that anymore. And it's like, well, then why are you teaching it? Why are you even bringing it up? And what do you mean anymore? Like, what do you mean I used to be cursed, but now I'm not? How does that work? You can't just, that's not how that works.
Yep.
So it's like, I was cursed because I'm Black. Now you're still Black, but you're not cursed. And so it implies like, oh, you're going to be white when you die and go to heaven. That's not how this works. And I certainly hope not, because I'm not trying to eat mac and cheese as a meal.
But also, why would why would God make us this different to all of a sudden make us all be the same in the next when we return to live with Him? That makes no sense to me. But
yeah, the underlying thing is that God is racist, and that just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think God is a racist. So
yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
But yeah, well, I mean, we have one more question. We can kind of segue into to kind of wrap it up in a more positive note. It's what kind of things could a PWI to make it safer and more inclusive for BIPOC students?
Ooh, yeah, good one. So one thing they can do, open up resources specifically for students of color, right?
Yes.
BYU is just now opening up their Office of Belonging. I have my own qualms and issues with that.
They're not saying diversity.
They refuse to say diversity
because that's divisive.
Exactly. And I was sitting in that meeting and I asked the question, why won't y'all include the term diversity in the Office of Belonging? And they said, oh, it's just too divisive. And I said, well, you realize that the only people who think it's divisive are the people who don't want diversity. And he's like, oh, yeah, but we're going to keep it that way. I was like, all right, bet. So I'm already a little skeptical about that office. We'll see how that goes. But opening up a real office for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, all those things, and making sure that there are resources for students of color. That means mental health services. That means, areas where students can gather. That's another thing we tried to do here at BYU. Tried to get a space.
So many times.
You know how hard it was to just get a room? We're like, hey, can we have a room where Black students can just be with each other? And they said no. I was like, all right, we can't have a room. Like, well, one lady we asked, you weren't there for that. No, one lady we asked, she's one of the BYU administrators, one of the vice presidents of the university. We asked her, hey, could we get a room? And she said, well, we just don't have the space.
And that's a lie. I
was like, there's not a room on campus. She's like, well, I just don't know. I'll look into it, but I don't think we have room for it. I was like, you don't have room to give us the space just for, it doesn't have to be all day. It could just be reserving a room in the student center.
Once a week.
No space. I was like, all right, no room in the inn, huh? Okay. But so just making space for students, I think is huge, because you make space for the things you care about. If there's something that you care about, you make sure that you're there for it. You make sure you got time in your schedule, what have you. It should be the same with universities. If they truly care about making something happen, then it's going to get done.
I just want to add that I think a lot of what's centered around what they can do to help BIPOC students is people are afraid. In one of our videos when we asked about reparations, one of the girls said, oh, we should stop trying to even things out and treat people blah, blah. People think that when you're going to treat someone differently, air quote, that you're giving them a handout, that that the other group is now down because they're giving something else. And the reality is there's just challenges that BIPOC students face that white students do not have to face. And there needs to be resources, like Nate said, and policies put into place to overcome those differences. That's where that equity piece comes in, especially, in my time at BYU as a Black student, I have done so much that a white student does not have to worry about, does not have to do. On top of being a student, I have to talk with my classmates about race. I have to worry about racial things. I have to deal with comments that are made by professors XYZ, and that's more on my mental health. But I still have to show up and take my tests every day the same way that a white student does, right? It's the same way that first-generation college students have more challenges, right? They have to work more normally. They know less, but they're expected to perform the same way as students whose parents brought them all the way up to this point of coming to college and still are helping them financially, things like that. That's why people who do not have the same experiences need to have resources available to help them. And so, like you said, a space would be good. Yeah, white students don't need a space because they don't have the same safety, cultural concerns that other minority students do. And so I think that that's a lot of what BYU needs to do. And they just need to not be afraid of what white students, white parents are going to say. Because to me, I feel like that's most of it. Half of it is that people don't see the need for it because they don't understand the experience of a non-white student. But also I think part of it is that they're afraid of that reaction of what will they look like when they see that they're air quote treating Black students different, Native American students different. And it's like, no, you're not treating them different. You're just giving them a place to catch up because of the other things that they face that white students just don't deal with.
There's is considered to be controversial by certain people, but it's really not. It's just common sense. I think it's Ibram X. Kendi who said that discrimination in the past has to be corrected by discrimination in the present, or something along those lines.
I love that.
And people are like, oh, that's so controversial, and socialism and communism. But the thing is, no, that's just common sense. If you have a scale, right, and you put a bunch of weights on one side of the scale, it's going to tip to one side. And then all you have to do to fix that is just discriminate to the other side of the scale. You add a whole bunch of weights, and it evens out. You're not going to keep adding weights to this side and just let it keep going, right? You're gonna add weights to the other side to balance things out. That's just
if you add
common
it to
sense.
both of them, it's still going to be uneven.
Exactly right. It's just common sense, but people think that's so controversial that we have to make up for the mistakes we've made in the past, and that's why things are not changing as quickly as we'd like them to. But at BYU, another thing, or just any PWI, another thing is representation. That's huge. You got to have representation among the faculty, among the administrators.
Literally.
At BYU, it's another thing that's on that race report. The faculty is 74% white male, I believe, and then it's like less than 1% of Black women, Hispanic women, Native American women, Asian women, and those kinds of things are not good, because you have a pretty decent amount of students coming here who need to see themselves reflected in the faculty, who need to know, hey, this could be me one day. Like, I'm much less likely, if I'm a student of color, I'm much less likely to come to a university where all of my professors are white men for the most part, with the exception of a few, and think, oh, I can be in this position, I can be a professor here. I'm not going to think that, because I don't see myself reflected, and that's just common sense. If you don't see yourself reflected in some
ways,
right, yeah, if you don't see yourself reflected in some place, then it's much less likely that you're going to try and move into those spaces. And there's always people who are brave enough to do that, but it's just less likely for a lot of people. Once you see yourself in that position, then it becomes easier to envision yourself getting there.
And when you have diverse administrators, professors, other faculty, staff, issues that affect marginalized communities are brought up because they're people from those communities, right? People who have disabilities, they have different experiences than people who don't, right? You need people from all these different backgrounds to bring that experience so that you can have that awareness. In President's Council, there is one person of color right now. One. In a room full of a bunch of old white men. What do you think his experience is trying to bring up concerns that he's representing all marginalized people? He's Polynesian. That is a lot for that one individual. And I think that is a lot of the reason why there's just no understanding of why there's issues, of why there's no recognition of why we need a space for Black students or whatever, because the people just don't have that experience. They just don't know that it's needed. Something that our church loves to say, with good information comes good revelation, right? But I've heard people say that all the time.
I've never heard that before.
Oh, I've heard that before. With good information, you can get good revelation. God's not going to just, it's along the ideas of God isn't going to just tell you how to, pass this test if you've never studied for it, right? It's like, when you have that information, God can help you, blah, blah, blah. So if that's what we really believe as members of this church and the BYU community, how the hell do you think you're going to know what a Black person needs if you don't talk to Black people? If you don't have any administrators who are Black, if you don't have any administrators who are Hispanic, who know what it's like to be an immigrant, such and such, like, you need people from these backgrounds to shed light, and then you need to listen to them. So when they do bring up the concerns, it's like, wow, I never thought of that, and not just ignore what they say, because that's also normally what happens too. Yeah.
This is a good episode.
It is. It's an issue not just, and what we're saying isn't just issues at BYU. It's issues at all PWIs, and it's also issues at all institutions, workplaces. And this is why, and at least I can say other places are at least trying, right? There are places that are analyzing what their promotions look like. There are places that are analyzing, okay, we need a person. I know there's one company that I was interviewing at, they have a person of color in every C position or whatever. Like, they want to make sure there's some type of diversity in every position and every group. And that's really important, because if it's just a bunch of white rich people making decisions, there's no way for that inclusion to really happen, because that's just not their experience. And so everyone needs to kind of improve and work on this. And other places are doing better than others, but places like a BYU need special help.
Special help, because BYU, that's the thing, BYU's not even trying. They say they
No.
are, but they're not even trying.
No,
they're
they're
doing
not.
the bare minimum to stay out of the public eye,
Yep.
and that's it. Because if they were actually trying, then they would have named that office the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion instead of the Office of Belonging.
And that's why I say that
means.
fear. They're more afraid of other people's reactions.
Mhm. Also, if they were trying, then things would be getting done. But that's, if you can't tell, I'm bitter.
I'm bitter too. That's why I'll never work for BYU. Everyone's like, go back and work for them, Rachel. And I'm like, do what? Work for who? I'm sorry. Also, they do not pay well enough for that. I'm sorry. To me, to work for BYU, they'd have to pay me $70K coming out of undergrad. If they pay me that, maybe I would consider it. But other than that, surely not.
Just to start. Well,
I think that's it for this episode.
Yeah. On that note, we'll close it out.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Black Menaces Podcast. If you have any questions or Menace moments that you'd like to share with me and Rachel, be sure to email us at blackmenacespodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Black Menaces. And be sure to subscribe for exclusive video episodes on our Patreon, the Menace Society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, guys. And make sure to always be a menace wherever you go and all the spaces that you're in, because we got to be a menace to make the change that we want to see.
Love it. On that note, we'll catch y'all later. Outro music fading away.